Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast sponsored by Applied Software. You're invited to join our MEP and construction innovation adventure with a mission to propel this great industry forward. My guest today is Jason Saunders. He's an experienced owner with a demonstrated history of pursuing construction technology and trying to help more contractors create efficiency using technology. He's a solutions engineer at eSub Construction Software. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks, Todd. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. So I would love to hear how you got into the construction industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So after I graduated college, I took a position with a building materials manufacturer in the roofing space, and I was managing a territory for them, working with contractors, distribution houses, architects. And from there, I learned a lot about the pre-con side of things, the actual construction side of things. And as I was going through that, I learned tons about how these companies were operating and what technologies they were using. And after that, I really just wanted to move into having my own shop and running it and seeing what I can do to kind of create some of those operational efficiencies and just work with the industry as a whole.
Yeah. So owning your own company, then, what did you learn from it that maybe made you look at the industry differently?
Yeah. So what that did is it showed me really how hard everyone in this industry is really working. There's so many long days and things to keep track of that it just taught me that how important it is to have systems and processes in place to be able to run efficiently so that when people are out sick or people are out on vacation, things like that, that you're able to kind of plug and pull things and create those efficiencies moving forward so that it's a sustainable system. And that's the probably the biggest thing that I took away from it, and finding out what I needed to do to get things done. And you can't do it all yourself.
Mhm. How well do you think the trades are handling that efficiency aspect currently?
I think there's a lot of companies that are doing a really, really good job of it. And I think there's a lot of companies out there as well that they're still doing a good job of it. But what's also happening is they're they're working a little bit harder and doing a lot of duplicate work because they're working with
Mhm.
multiple different things and kind of sort of creating these data silos. And finding ways to streamline that, I think, is something that's really, really important, and getting everyone within the organization to communicate with each other. So, one of the biggest things I like to touch on from an operational efficiency standpoint is just getting on the same page, because there's so many areas of the company that are operating that don't know what's happening from over here to over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so easy to kind of form those silos and just get caught up in what you're doing that it's very easy to not even think about the other departments and groups of what they're doing.
Correct. And then you just start to create those miscommunications, and that's when those mistakes are going to start to happen. And it's not an easy fix. It's something that takes a lot of time and effort to put into to create those solutions. And it sort of creates, you need the whole company to be able to come together and get on the same page to be able to do that. And if one person in one group is trying to do that, and everywhere else is not, then you're not going to create that consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's back up a minute. What does operational efficiency, what does that really look like in practice? And then why should the trades really care about it?
Yeah, and I think that's really important for the trades to care about. Again, to the same point that I just mentioned, is getting on that same page with everybody. And what we're seeing a lot right now from a trade standpoint, and why that's important, is that there's labor shortages going on. There's a lot of older project managers that men and women, and then we have the younger project managers that are coming up to speed. And those younger PMs are coming in and wanting technology to be able to run more efficiently. And some of the older PMs that we have are, they've been set in their ways. They've been doing it for 30 years, and there's nothing wrong with that. They've been, it's been working for them. But how do we get them to operate together? So let's just
Mhm.
say we have our older project managers that have all this tribal knowledge that's great for learning and growing the company. And then we have our younger PMs that are better with operating with some of that software. And how do we coordinate that and get those to work together?
Mhm. Yeah. So that communication piece is huge there, and having that clarity. What are what does that look like? Like, how do you pull those different groups that are approaching it in different ways, different mentalities? How do you pull them together to provide that clarity that everybody
Yeah.
buys in with?
So what I had a lot of success with is creating simplicity. So you need to make it so that it's easy enough so that the use of technology is actually benefiting you. Technology for technology's sake is not something that's going to create efficiencies within the company. We need to be able to make it easy enough so that everybody can do it. And then you're actually creating good data through that.
Yeah. What are some of those? An area that's been really kind of interesting to me is what's in what are some of those foundational building blocks that you need for that successful tech implementation? And to your point, you said technology for technology's sake isn't going to do anything, which I totally agree. What are some of those kind of entry level steps and baby steps that you need to have in place and kind of master that before you start really looking at the technology?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think putting together a plan of what technology you actually need is something that's the most important part. So this is the technology we need and this is why we need it. And then having a plan to implement that into the team so that you can get the buy-in. Because if there's not buy-in from everybody, you're not going to get that data back to the office to make it actually usable. So one of the things that I always tried to focus on was creating a process and a plan so that when I went to buy that technology and then I went to implement it, I already had it laid out to what I was hoping it would look like, because fires are going to happen. It's construction. There's fires every day and things are going to change. So what I need to be able to execute a plan, and things are going to change along the way, and I need to be able to be flexible from there.
Yeah, that agility is a key component for sure. What about those people that they may want to embrace technology and figure out what's going to really work for them, but they're just totally overwhelmed with all the options out there.
Mm-hmm.
How do they kind of get over that sense of overwhelmingness of like, I don't even know where to go. There's 100 new contact applications coming on
Yeah.
seemingly every week.
Right. Yeah, I think it's finding the right partners, and some things are gonna not being afraid to try. I think is part of that as well. And sitting there and being stagnant can be a problem, because if you just overanalyze the whole situation and say, well, I'll just wait and I'll keep fine tuning what I want this to look like, I found ended up making things more difficult for me versus when I just said, okay, here's what I'm laying out. This is what I'm going to do. And now I needed to select the right partner who's going to be there to help me through this process. Is this going to be a situation where I sign up for something and then I don't have the support I need? So I think when I went through and vetted things, that was the most important component of this, was who is really going to be there to make sure that I get this implemented and off the ground.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's huge, because the software for the software's sake, if you don't know really how to leverage it and you're not leaning on your partners, then you're really kind of handicapped there. You're at
Right.
a big disadvantage.
And I think you start to create those data silos when you don't have a plan in place and you just start to buy technology for technology's sake. Then what you're doing is you're just creating data silos within the company, and it could end up becoming cumbersome. But if you have a plan to get everybody on the same page and pulled together, then and obviously the correct partners, then I think you're going to have a lot more success long term.
Yeah. What's the difference between getting a ton of data and having information to be able to use as well?
Yeah, no, Todd, I think that's a great question. So they're very different things, but they're also a little bit the same in the same breath. So information,
Mhm.
I think, is just, this is what we need to cover our backs if something comes up down the road. But are you going to be able to take that information and create actionable steps to improve process, or are you just collecting information for information's sake? Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be collecting it. You should always be out there collecting your daily reports because you want to have that information. But the difference there is data is being able to take that and then apply it to being better at whatever process you're trying to improve. So if you're just out there collecting forms and then you're stuffing them in a file cabinet or you're putting them on your server, that's excellent to have in case something comes up long term. But when you're able to actually create easy to use applications for the team to collect that good data for you, so that you can actually apply it to improving, I think that's a completely different thing. And I think that's really important, because when I first started, we did all the right things. We collected the information we needed, but then we realized that we just had information, and to create the data out of it, I was going to have to take that, put it into something else to actually run some reporting and figure out what's actually happening out there, not just what my gut's telling me.
Yeah. So this is kind of a little soapbox for me, this topic of why is the industry not leveraging their data more? Because construction, there's so much data that is being collected on these projects, but then it seems like it's just like goes into this vault that nobody really goes back and figures out how to mine it properly, and then how to leverage that to get better on the next project and get more efficient. There's a lot of answers in that data that people don't seem to be combing through. Why do you think that there's been this reluctancy to go through the data?
I think that it's, and I don't know if it's a reluctancy to go through the data, or if it's maybe the plan that was in place to utilize that data hasn't been enforced. So you're still collecting, because this is something everyone's been collecting this data for a while now. But
Sure.
How do we actually take that and make it effective? Is it a situation where we take it and we dump it into a Tableau or a Power BI and actually start to run some of this reporting? Or maybe it's a situation where we need to start looking into some softwares that actually are going to be able to run these efficient reports for us and create those efficiencies, because it does take time to run through the data and figure out what it actually means. And I think sometimes that step gets missed. It's collected, and this is what we want, but we have to do that middle piece and actually run that reporting and figure out what it is. And I think some of the automation of that with a lot of the softwares that are coming out and the ones that are currently available are able to do, but it's finding the right partner.
Yeah. I think that enforcement piece that you just mentioned there that's huge. And I like the way you phrased it as well, in that you can have the plan, you can collect all the data, but if there's not the kind of the oversight to make sure it's actually getting done and being utilized, it's very easy to just put it on the back burner and not really think about it. And that's where that automation piece is going to be huge.
I agree, and it's a long-term outlook. So what you see is if you're there's so many fires coming up within every single project that you're working on, that you just keep kicking the can down the road and saying, okay, well, we'll get to that, we'll get to that, we'll get to that. At some point, you need to have to enforce and put that plan in place and say, all right, you know what, we're going to put a focus on this right now, and then we're going to work on being able to actually apply it as we continue to move forward.
Yeah. What are some of the hurdles that you think that the trades and construction in general are kind of up against when it comes to harnessing this data?
So, I think some of the things is actual good, I'll use the old adage of good data in is good data out. And we're still getting a lot of bad data in. So part of that, I think, is ease of use. And if we can't make this easier and faster for the field to capture the info, then we're going to start to miss little components of that data, because some of the things that are really pertinent to the success of the future of utilizing this data isn't going to be used. So that if the data is bad, then we're not going to spend that focus that we need on it to actually create that improvement. So from a software standpoint, I think ease of use is one of the most important things that I used to look for going through a software was, all right, how can I get my guys in the field to actually capture this for me so that I can go through and actually apply it?
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a component there with getting the guys in the field to adopt it, that they just aren't bought into the vision of why the data is useful? They don't necessarily see how it relates to them. So if you cast that vision and make it relatable, that would bring more buy-in to them.
Absolutely, Todd. So back to my original point of getting on the same page. I think sometimes what happens when software is being bought is it's being bought from a managerial level with a vision, but that wasn't communicated to the field. And how is that going to help the field? Right. So if the field doesn't see how it's going to improve their day-to-day and make their life easier, all they see it as is another way for them to either be monitored or for them to go in and have to do extra work. And that's not necessarily the case, because there's a lot of softwares out there that are actually making things easier, but that message has not been relayed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point, because and to adapt the message of your vision to the different audiences that you're talking to. So the managerial vision, it's a great thing. They should for sure have that of how they want to use it. But
Right.
then how that gets applied to those different groups, whether it's in the office and the designers or it's out into the field, that message changes and needs to change for how they're going to be actually day-to-day handling that and their component of it.
Absolutely. And particularly for the trades where, that labor component is going to be your largest variable to what that bottom line looks like. Your
Sure.
equipment costs, your material costs, some of your subcontracts potentially. You're pretty aware of what those costs are going to look like going forward, but your labor component is something that you really need to keep a close eye on. And if the people responsible for getting you that information to figure out how productive you are from a labor standpoint is not coming in accurately, then that's where your biggest variable just got even bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes total sense. Do you think that the increase in the digital transformation over the last year has changed this dilemma in any significant way?
I think it has. I think a lot of companies are putting a big focus on starting to implement more technologies within their companies, because they realize that with people working from home or all these different jobs, that there's a lot of information that gets passed in the office. When you're in the office, you run into each other, you say things, and you can get things done. But being able to communicate over a centralized area about what's going on, I think is going to be really, really impactful. And I've definitely seen it myself throughout this last year of that need being kind of flushed to the surface versus before it could easily be pushed down the road, like we were mentioning a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you think that there's any myths in the industry or around, efficiency or technology adoption that is pretty commonly believed, it just really isn't true?
I think that companies are essentially wanting to put this technology in place, and any myths around it is there's just that natural hesitancy for change. And there's been so much consistency within the construction industry for so many years that there's almost this, not a stigma, but there's just sort of this portion of it that they're not wanting to kind of take the jump, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. Well, here's my kind of softball question tee up for you. Why are you so passionate about the trades?
So having owned my own trade contracting company, and just wanting to be able to help as many companies as I possibly can create those efficiencies. I'm really passionate about it because I've seen it firsthand, and I've seen how hard people work in it. And if I can do anything I can in my power to make that easier for other trade contractors, that's just an absolute passion of mine, to try and just be as helpful as I possibly can. And learning about all these different technologies that are in place and how to implement those technologies, if I can take that knowledge and I can teach other people and help other people grow their companies, that's something that is really meaningful to me.
Yeah. What do you think the big potential and possibility of MEPs really looking like over the next couple of years?
I think there's a really big possibility, and as bad as this past year has been, the having recognized that the way technology can help is something that I think is going to be really, really important. And I think they're going to really grab onto that and start to look into those technologies and start to invest that money into different products.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the potential there is just kind of bursting at the seams. I think it's an exciting time to be in construction, and MEP is going to be the driving force of a lot of the innovation happening.
I think so too. And there's just so many different, there's a lot of different options out there. And if the thing I can stress enough is just make a plan and follow it.
Amen. I'm all about having that plan at the front side. I think
right.
there's a time and place. And sometimes it's a necessity to kind of build the plane while you're flying it, but
Yeah,
it sure makes it easier if you have that plan
right.
on the front side.
Well, and if you already have that flexibility dealing with everything that you do on a daily basis, working with your current process, then you can have the flexibility to make slight modifications to your plan. But as long as you have that upfront time that you've spent creating that plan, then at least you have a framework to work off of. So to use the reference that you just made as kind of building the plane as you fly it, that's part of it. But at least make sure that you have the design of the plane, because things are going to change as you go through and pick these different technologies.
Yeah, preach. I agree. So eSub is all about power to the trades. What does that really mean to you?
Yeah. So what that means to me is we're trying to give the trades a system of record for themselves. And a lot of trades are out there, and they have to use a GC system to put things in place. But what that makes them do is try and do the extra work to take that information and store it on their own servers, but they're not really working out of their own system. So by creating a system specifically for the trades, we're trying to help them have that system of record so that they know they can track everything appropriately. So there's that information piece. But from a data standpoint, we want to be able to take that information and make decisions off of it. Because if I'm just out there working within a different GC system, I'm not actually creating data. All I'm doing is creating information. So the information I'm providing them is data for them, but it's not data for me. So what I want to do is I want to be able to create my own system. I want to run my own reports and be able to figure out how I can be more efficient, not just how I can, fill out forms for someone else.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, how do people get a hold of you and find out more information on eSub and what you all are doing?
Yeah. So I'm Jason Saunders. I'm a solutions engineer over at eSub. I can be contacted directly at my email, which is jason.saunders@esub.com. Or it's even easier to just go on our website and request some more information from us as well, depending on what you're trying to get. But I'm also I'm obviously happy to field questions myself or redirect it to the right parties that would need to be assisting.
Awesome. Final question. What does innovation mean to you?
So innovation means to me finding ways to be better. To keep it short, I think it's just finding ways to become better at what you're currently doing and take that information and apply it to the future. And obviously just have that long-term look of this is where I am and this is where I want to be 5 years from now. Not this is where I am and I hope I'm above water at 5 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah. Thriving, not just surviving.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thanks so much for taking the time, and I really appreciate your passion for the trades there.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Todd. Thanks for having me on the show. And, I look forward to talking with you soon.